This is aisle 42. Now, this conversation is not for the faint of heart. It's a powerful and deeply personal look into Ian's raw and profound path. One that starts and ends talking about Mitsoh's delicious pemmican strips, available in a grocery store near you. But it's the middle part, his telling of his turbulent past and inspirations along the way, that will have you glued to your earbuds. Ian's vision goes beyond sharing authentic Indigenous food. It's about reclaiming cultural identity, creating opportunities for his community, and becoming the best human he can be. So let's get into it. And just a heads up, this episode is not family friendly. The future of food starts right now. Ian, I love that we're having this chat. You make beautiful product and you have a beautiful story, and I can't wait to get into all of these things. But before we do that, I want to welcome you to the show officially with the big question, and that is, if you could look to the future and if you could get excited about one new thing in the food system, what would that new thing be?
Well, right on the top, straight out, I would love to see an Indigenous category within the mainstream stores. I think there's a huge shift, and it's coming. We got all different ethnic races that have their own category within the stores, but everybody's a visitor here to Canada, in which we call Turtle Island, and unfortunately, we're not in there. So yeah, I would love to see that. I would love to see an Indigenous category. I would love to see Indigenous shelving, a spot for us to have to be able to bring our cultural foods, everything from culture, language to foods back in, and to showcase it to everybody here.
That would be a beautiful thing. I love it. I'm so glad you said that.
Thanks, man.
So before we go any further, I think you need to tell listeners what it is that you guys are making over at Mitsoh.
So what we are is Mitsoh means eat in Cree, first of all. And so we specialize in Indigenous meat snacks, authentic Indigenous meat snacks that predates any colonial ways that have come in. So some of the first foods of Canada, we'll say. So we're here to preserve, restore, and share and bring back all these traditional foods that are lost now, that were once here to help early settlers that have now been forgotten.
Amazing. And you guys have quite a lineup of it's bison, and what other ingredients are you working with outside of just bison meat?
Our product that we're currently focusing on right now is the traditional pemican. Pemican, that is the actual way to say it. And it means like fine ground meat. The pemmican is derived from the dry meat. And so we have a traditional dry meat, which is just buffalo and smoke, very clean, healthy. It's soy free, gluten free, zero carbs. It's just buffalo and smoke. So that is one of the oldest traditional foods to Canada. And so from that, we would ground it up on a stone, and then we would add berries. Now, people ask, oh, berries and meat, buffalo, why the buffalo? I'll explain all of that too as well here. So the berries, the way that we did it is because we roamed the lands, our people were always out hunters, gatherers. Wherever we were at and whatever was in season, the blueberry, the Saskatoon, the strawberries, the cranberries, all of these berries that we've used, we would take these berries and we dry them out, and we would combine them with that meat that was finely ground down, and we would add fats with it too as well. So that is what traditional pemmican has come now. So we use the berries specifically because all these berries, we always known the benefits of all of these berries to help keep us sustained through the cold, hard winters, hot summers, you name it.
And I think all of your product, maybe there might be maybe one that I haven't, but the blueberry meat is just It's off the charts. I would consider myself very much a category shopper for you. I buy your product from an urban fair in Vancouver, in Olympic Village in Vancouver. That's where I find you. And I was the kid that on my bike route when I was 10 years old would swing by the local butcher and I would buy 45 cents worth of beef jerky on my way home. And my dad was always like, "Oh, did you bring any for me?" It was, that type of meat, was beef jerky anyway. It was part of my childhood. I have great memories of sharing beef jerky with my dad and just that experience. But years later, I meet you at an event at a food show and I'm like, "Oh, okay, dried meat, all right." And I tried it for the first time. I had never had berries in meat before. I had never had buffalo meat before, at least maybe just not dried. I'd never had a dried buffalo meat. And so the eating experience was wonderful. But then, of course, I start to hear from you about how this all began. And there are a lot of food founders that have stories of entrepreneurial dreams and all these different experiences around food and their journeys. And your story stood out to me. And I would love it if you could refresh my memory a little bit and share with listeners, like, where did this idea come from? Because getting into the food space, getting into meat processing, these are not things that are easily done. They are hard journeys, but you have leaned into it in a way that is reflective of not only your values, but that of your community.
Well, in my culture, it's always best to know where you come from. The stories that we share and all of the experiences are best known if you know where you've come from and how it all began. So I had always had a passion for cooking. Always. I love to be able to go out and serve my family at like 8 years old. I can make a beef mandarin stir fry, Mr. Subway, exactly the same. And there was one other one, I forget what it was. And so everybody played all these different games and stuff. I played restaurant. That's what I played. So I always had a passion for it, always had a passion for cooking. I just never knew to what extent. I come from a pretty rough background. I grew up in a very clean, sober home. I never seen drinking in my home, but we grew up on the reservation. And my father, he was already clean and sober, same with my mom. But just growing up on the reserve and stuff, there was just a whole bunch of the lifestyle that I was exposed to, which was normal for me and for everybody else growing up there, which was alcohol, drinking, partying, you name it. So at a very young age, I started drinking at a very, very young age, probably like 9, 10 years old. I was already drinking. And then from there, it just escalated. I started getting into like selling drugs. I started getting into like all of that kind of a lifestyle where I became an entrepreneur in that sense. And I was independent and I was like 11 years old with like $5,000 in my pocket. And it was crazy. And my father found out. I was 13 now, and my father found out because people were coming to the house. Like if I couldn't hide it anymore, and they were literally coming to the house where my family was at and asking to see me. And my dad, he knew for a long time. He was just a very quiet man. He just never had the courage to really say something to me, but it took him everything finally. And he just came into my room one day and said, "Listen, I know what you're doing. I don't like it. Get out. You either quit or you get out." And he gave me the option. But, I was already enriched with this. That's all I could think about and do. That's all that I knew now. And so I let my pride get to me and I just said, "Well, fuck it. I'm out of here, man. I'm gone." So he kicked me out. I was out on the street. I left from the reserve, which is Big Stone Cree Nation. I left from there. Also, Dene from Fort Good Hope, Northwest Territories. And I left from Wabasca and I hitchhiked down to Edmonton at 13. By then, this is kind of like where the money stopped now. And I was like really feeling the squeeze of like, I was hurting, man. I got out of this truck over at the CI and it was a hot summer night. And I just walked around all night, like lost. nowhere to go, no home, no nothing, nothing but just ego. Like, fuck, I don't need anybody, whatever, blah blah. But I just was so I really put myself through a bad spin because of that pride. So I did that for years, man. I lived on the streets. I lived on the streets in Edmonton. I started getting into some more shit there, gangs, alcohol, more drugs, getting into like selling now and bringing it back to my community now. And like, yeah, I did that for the longest time. It was like a really dark phase in my life, like really, really dark. But I always had this passion for cooking still. And even though times would go and I try and steer off from it to get out of that shit, this lady, she had a fine dining restaurant. Her name was Madeline, and she felt sorry for me. She took me in, and she knew what I was doing. This was in Hobima area, and she knew what I was doing, and she was like, you know what, come in, I'll give you a job doing dishes and stuff, and you can learn and stuff. And so I went in there, and I'd go in there, do dishes. I'd start to learn more about the kitchens. I liked it, I loved it. It was very fast paced. I learned lots about it. And then eventually she got me on other things, first line, second line, grill. Then I was able to start generating the orders and start doing everything on my side. And I was incredibly gifted at a very, very fast pace here. Then I'd steer off and I'd go back and do this shit all over again. I'd get back to the drugs and drinking and whatever, and try to take over the world and whatever it was and stuff. And then it was around 19, we got caught. The doors got kicked in. Undercover came in, kicked open the doors where I had quite a few homes working for me all over up north. And then the doors got kicked in. Everybody got arrested. And yeah, man, went on the run for like 3 years. Cops were looking for me, couldn't find me. I just was AWOL all over. And cops were searching me for a longest time. And eventually I just got tired of running. I couldn't go home anymore. I couldn't see my parents, nothing. They were looking for me everywhere. And I just got tired of it. I was over at a 7-Eleven, and I called them up and I said, "Hey, you guys are looking for me. Here I am." And then they were like, "Well, hey, can you just come into the can you come into the freaking detachment?" And I was like, "You guys have been fucking looking for me for 3 years. This is the only time I'm calling you. Like, I'm telling you right now, if you're not here, I am not going." And they're like, "What's your name?" And I was like, "Ian Gladue, blah, 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 this and that." All of a sudden, fucking sirens were coming from everywhere. And I was at like 7-Eleven, and guns were drawn. I'm trying to drink my last bottle of fucking whiskey because I know I'm going to jail now. And anyway, they end up grabbing me, throwing me in. I went to jail and got out after, I think it was like 9 months, a year. Yeah, it was probably close to a year. I got out. Came out, a couple buddies of mine picked me up, went out, partied with them, and they picked me up in a stolen vehicle. And yeah, went right back to jail the next day. It's crazy. Yeah, so man, I live a life of, yeah, I was a gangster, man, I was a gangster. And it was a dark, horrible experience, but I learned lots from it. I learned about who I am and who I don't want to be, and what I want my boys to not be, and how to help guide them and stuff. So eventually down the road, I was about 26 now. I got into more cooking. I had my first daughter, and I used to work for their family. They had a concession, and it was called Res Boys. I was sitting in there. I was working grill, and I was looking at this long lineup. Man, this freaking lineup was just nuts. And I was sitting there, and I'm just killing it. I'm fast, like really, really fast. I can pump out the orders, like no word of a lie. And I'm looking at this long lineup, and I'm thinking, man, why is our food only popular at powwows? Like, why? And there's over 1 million people at like a freaking hour and some away, and nobody's wants to bring it into the city. Like, why? So I started thinking like that. I started going around to each of the old timers. Like these guys have been here doing powwow trails long before me. And I started going around to them, asking them questions like, how come you guys don't go in the city? How come you don't want to bring the foods in there? Like you have everything set, you have your own concessions, you have, and I just went around and around and around, and all of the answers that they give me response was just like, who's gonna want us? Who's gonna eat our food? Oh, it's too hard. Ah, there's too many rules. And I was just getting this from each of them. And I was just like, what? So much opportunity there. And I realized, though, a lot of that came back from residential schools later on. I realized these things that came from, they were beaten from the system. Our people were beaten from the system for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it was hard for them to get past it. I started thinking about all the shit that I've been through though, man. Homelessness, drugs, alcohol, jail, you name it. I like there's a whole bunch of shit I could talk about here that'll keep your freaking audience stuck here, like for real. Like the shit that I did, and oh my gosh. But
I thought I was a bad boy because I sold fireworks. I guess, I guess you have me beat.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it was fucking crazy, man. Yeah, so then I thought about all these things that I've been through, and I was like, man, like I'm never one to give up. Like I just I'm very stubborn. I always look at what I've been through, where I slept. I used to freaking sleep underneath this bridge, man. And because I didn't have anywhere to sleep and I was trying to find somewhere to go and I was scared because sometimes you'd sleep on the ground and there'd be a lot of like fucking weirdos coming after you while you're sleeping and shit. And I just didn't feel safe. I was really young. So I'd go climb up underneath this bridge and tuck myself up in this little gap that was there and I'd sleep there and I'd feel safe there. Eh? And I just keep thinking about that goddamn bridge. And I'm like, oh, there's freaking no way. Like, it ends here. It doesn't stop here. There's something more for me. I always know that there was something more for me. And like from the dealing drugs and this and that, I just had a natural act for sales and whatever it was. And I just didn't know to what extent. I didn't know how to harness my gifts properly and to use them because I was never taught that. We're not taught about savings. We're not taught about investments. We're not taught about any of these things. We're just taught to exist for the day. Unfortunately, that's what I grew up with. So it was like 2009, I started thinking about bringing indigenous foods. Now I'm like, man, I wonder if I bring indigenous foods into mainstream. Started like turning some wheels for me, and started thinking about it. But hey, I burnt every fucking buddy that I could in my past. Like I had zero credit. I had shit credit. I think my credit was probably like 400 or something like that. Like I burnt every fucking credit card there was, or this and that. I burnt everything, everybody. I honestly didn't expect to live that long. I lived for the day and I didn't care and I just was so irresponsible and now I got to restart and try to do better and I'm like shit, I cleaned up my act now. I'm trying to get a job. I started working the rigs now. I started working the oil field and I was like trying to get out of that whole freaking lifestyle and leave it all behind and do better for my daughter now and I was doing that. So, and then I started thinking, well, I'm going to bring this indigenous foods back into mainstream. Like, here's something I want to do now. I want to work for myself. I want to do that. And so let's see what can actually unfold with this. But I worked the freaking rigs for so long. Eventually, I was close to coming out. It was 2009, February 2nd.
Oh,
Actually,
that was
shit, it was
yesterday.
just like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I was working the rigs and I was working night shift. It was cold, man. It was freezing, freezing cold. I came on for freaking night shift, walked up the tanks. Somebody froze the tanks that were on there. It's these big mud tanks, probably like 12 feet high, expanding about 20 feet wide. And they're like huge mud tanks that they use to circulate the whole system in that well and they froze it because it was so cold. They didn't turn the freaking agitators, etc., and it froze. And they put a steam hose in there to be sneaky. And so it was going all day. The next shift came on, and there was all this fog coming up and steam because it was getting hot now. One of the guys called me up on the mud tanks. I need your hand. Come here, come here. And they start fucking screaming. Everyone's screaming on the rigs, man. It's crazy. So I go up, get on there, and where the steam hose was going in on the top of the gates, it rattles because the steam shooting in. And the gate that was there rattled and it fell in. So it was a big square gate that you can use to go in the tank to clean it. So this gate fell in from there. As I walked in, I fell into this, but I just grabbed for anything. And I held on for my dear life, man. I just felt this. I can't explain this pain, but I fell in up to my knees and I'm just screaming. The guy comes over. Holy shit. He grabs me, pulls me up, and I'm standing there on the tanks. I pull off all my clothes, I pull off my boots, all my long johns. And as I pulled down my freaking long johns, my skin just followed them right to my freaking knee, like right to my ankles. I was just looking down at my feet, and there was a big roll of skin on round my freaking ankles. And I just like, what the fuck? And I just kept looking at it. It was unreal. I walked off from the tanks. I went and sat in the change room. My push comes in. Holy shit, are you okay? And he's like, holy fuck. He's looking at me and I'm sitting there looking at him in shock. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I said, I'll get back to work here. Just give me a second here. I just gotta re-fucking group here. And he's like, fuck that. You're going to the hospital. And I was like, and if you go to the hospital on the rigs, you're a pussy and blah, blah, blah. And you grow up with all this mentality of how hard you are and solid you are. And you can lose a finger and still go back to work the next day or whatever, right? It's crazy what the mentality is. Like you get trained to be something different, minus 40 up there and stuff, right? So yeah, I was nuts. I went to the hospital, went through everything again. I was just doing good now. I was like, quit drinking, everything, like saving money for my daughter, doing better, being a good dad, this and that. And now I got hurt. I was like, fuck. So back to square one and had to learn to walk again. They told me you might not be able to walk again. It's so bad. Had like 890 staples all over my leg. They took skin from my ass, the back of me here, took it all, and they put it all on my legs. It all worked. And I spent about 3.5 months at the U of A in the burn unit, and it was unreal. It was the craziest experience I've ever went through, man. But one thing I learned from it when I walked out of there, and I told the doctor, I said, I'm walking out of here. And he said, okay. And I told him, I said, I'm going to walk out of this place. And I was kind of looking outside the window every now and then. I'd see this grass and stuff. And I was like, just couldn't wait to put my feet in the grass again or something. I just wanted to just feel it, eh? And I was just completely like crawl into the bathroom on my stomach. Like I can't move my legs. They're completely bound up. And it was it was horrible. It was absolutely crazy, man. Yeah, but I got past it. I got through it, came out, walked. First thing I did, I went out, I put my feet in the grass, man. Oh, it was the best feeling. I learned lots about that. I learned lots about forgiveness for starters. I learned to forgive the guy that I got hurt from on the tank. The old me was like, this fucking guy's dead. I'm gonna go to jail. Fucking 3.5 years. I'll do a quick fucking 3.5. No problem. Blah blah. Like that's where the freaking mind was going. I couldn't wait to get out of jail to find this guy because I just felt ugly now. Like who's gonna want me? All this self pity came in. It was crazy, man. But I learned like something changed in me. Something shifted, and I learned lots about humility. I learned lots about forgiveness, and I walked out of there feeling completely new. Then I went back and tried to start this whole venture. I didn't save a penny. Again, I had shit credit. couldn't buy nothing. I wanted to buy this big concession, but I'm like, they're like 160 grand. How can I buy a big concession with bad credit and no money, but with this dream and nobody believing in me, except for myself and my mom. My mom, right? So, which every mom does that, right? And yeah, man, went out and I just used all my street smarts. I knew I couldn't afford this now. I knew I couldn't do it, but I said, what can I do to still accomplish this? Like, what other alternatives do I have to make this dream a reality again? I just don't give up, man. Like, I just refuse. So I built this little tiny cart, probably the size of your desk. And I learned lots from the rigs about circulation, water flow, you friggin' name it. Like, I learned lots about fittings, and my dad was an electrician, so I learned a lot from him as a kid too, as well, about how to wire up the cart and this and that. And then my little bit of experience that I had working all the kitchens and here and there, I was able to piece it all together, and I built this little cart. And it was I was trying to get a class E. It's like where you can cook burgers and like high risk, they call them. And so I called the inspector over. His name was Stephen Nebel at the time. He was one of the main inspectors here in Edmonton. And I called him over and said, "Hey, I'm trying to build this cart here." And he's like, "Ian, like, for what you want to do, like, I don't see it happening, to be honest." And I was like, well, don't tell me no. Just tell me what I need to do to make this pass. He gave me this book. It was crazy, man. Like, all the do's and don'ts were just crazy in there. And I was just like, holy shit, how am I going to make this work? It's got to be a certain distance from this and that. And it can't be close to this. And it was just like, how can I do this in this confined space and still do it? Well, I failed like 8 times, like for real. And I was so frustrated. I was like, fuck. And I was just about to like call it. And I was like, and I started thinking about that goddamn bridge. And I was like, all right. So I went back, tweaked it up, called him up. Steven, I think I got it. He comes, he says, all right, where are you at? And I tell him. He comes out, checks it over. He's looking at me. He's like, man. And I was like, yeah, I get it. I failed. What do I need to pass it though? And he was like, no, man. He's like, you're good. You're good to go. Like, this is crazy. I can't believe you did it. And so I built one of the first class E high risk mobile carts from hand, right from scratch, with this passion and dream about wanting to bring Indigenous foods back in the mainstream, failing everything over and over. Like, all my people were saying, it's too hard. Who's going to buy it? All these things. I just kept hearing all these things, man. And I was like, let's go. Let's fucking go. Like, screw this. Like, there's no way. Like, I didn't go through all this shit in life to stop here. Let's go. And I just kept pushing. I went through it. We went out on Churchill Square. It was April 4th, 2013. We didn't know what to expect. There was still some snow on the ground. It was a bit chilly. We went there for the lunch rush, and it was unreal, man. The freaking lineup was like as far as you can see. And I just thought, holy, and we're just we're just passing out the orders. We're giving her. And we sold out that day. I thought it was just like maybe the first experience, the first day, people are just trying it. The second day, third day, just over and over and over again. At the time, we were doing like Indigenous food with a westernized twist. We use traditional bannock. Bannock is a cultural food to us too, as well. And so we use this bannock with a westernized twist, with like buffalo bannock burgers or bacon cheddar bannock burgers or mushroom bacon Swiss bannock burgers or native tacos. And the other one was called a res dog, which was a big ass smoky and a big bun of bannock. And so we had, it was unreal. I didn't realize the impact that it was going to make, to be honest. I thought it was just like the whole reason why I had started, to be truthful, was so my mom didn't have to work again. So then we went from there and flipped up I took all my street smarts, everything, and I started flipping up all my dollars, all everything I've learned on the street, how to like do shit and like pinch pennies and this and that. And like I just combined it all, man. I have no freaking education, no nothing, just all drive, passion, street smarts. A friend of mine says that I come from a school of hard knocks, is what he says. But
Sounds like an understatement, Ian. An absolute understatement. Hard knocks. Yeah.
yeah, so we just grinded from there. We flipped every penny. Eventually, that year, I was able to buy out a full concession, a big, huge concession trailer, cash, straight out. From there, we focused on bigger events like K Days, Taste of Edmonton, all these huge, massive events where I started to want to have more walks of life tasting our foods. Then a restaurant came to life, then a second location, then mass catering everywhere in the city. It was unreal. Like just that big bomb that we put off. It was like a big wave, just went like this. And then our people were coming from everywhere. They were like, oh my goodness, how much that you've inspired me. Oh, because of you, I did this. And it was just like completely blown away because I didn't realize the impact it was going to do on my people or for my people, and how it was going to affect them. And man, there was this huge shift that was coming, and everybody was coming from all over, inspired and touched by what we were doing. Then in 2015, I started to like feel another calling. I felt like there was something bigger and deeper coming, like Bannock is absolutely traditional for sure. And it's something we do. And, but I started thinking about what did we do before Bannock? What did we eat before Bannock? I started thinking like, what were the first, as my role started to unfold and I started to see my calling of like, now I'm like, I'm not in the food business like this. Like I'm a trailblazer in a sense. Like and what I'm doing here, how is it affecting my people? Now I got to think more about that than just being selfish my whole life. What can I do better to be a better version? And always challenging myself now, being clean, sober, drug free now, completely changed my whole life, learned my cultural identity, language, all these things that were taken from us. I brought them back into my life and my children's life now. And so from there, I was sitting there with my mom one day and I was like, she's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I'm missing something. Like there's something more. And she's like, what do you mean? Like she's blown away too. She's like, you got the restaurants, you have the concessions, you have all of these things. You're like, what are you talking about? Like, we're very blessed. I said, yes, I know we're blessed, but I just feel like there's something else. And she's sitting there cutting up some meat, hanging it on the racks. And I looked at it and I said, that's it. That's it. And she said, what? I said, we're going to bring back traditional dry meat and pemmican back into freaking mainstream. What is more authentic to Canada than the first foods of our people? The first foods of the first nations, Dene, the Inuit, Métis. What are the first foods of our people? Traditional dry meat, dry fish, pemmican. There's all these different ones down the line too, but holy smokes, man. We used to offer traditional tea like Laboom tea and Bannock in the restaurant when people came just as like an experience. And now we were bringing dry meat in there and pemmican, and it just blew up. People were now coming for the dry meat and asking to buy the dry meat, and the sales, like they weren't asking for the bannock burgers as much anymore or anything like that. It was all dry meat and stuff like that. And then I got a call from a store and they were like, hey, we heard you got dry meat for sale, traditional bun so on, which means thin sliced meat in Cree. And I said, yeah, I got it. They're like, oh, we want to carry it in our store. Are you all set? Like you got your packaging, you got your UPC, GS1s, you got your label, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh yeah, for sure. I got it all. Don't worry about it. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. Like, let's go. Let's go. I didn't know shit about anything. I just quickly threw some stuff together and put it in a bag. And it was nuts. We shipped it out to the store. They sold out in like 4 hours. Like, it was unreal. It was unreal. All our people were just like hitting these stores and just buying it up. And then one store went to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. Freezing Bros jumped online, jumped on with us. We got like 35 stores total. We're doing like dry meat around the clock. My wife comes to me and she's like, listen, I know Native Delights is your baby. Like, that's where it all started from. And that's what we call the concessions and all that side there. And she's like, I know it's your baby, but I need you to look at this. And I said, yeah, what? She says, look at Bunso look at Native Delights' account, just here, and then look at Bunso account. And she said, and now we're injecting money into Native Delights now because, well, for one, we kind of like, we refused to sell booze in the restaurant. I just felt like there was enough places for my people to go and do that. And I just wanted a safe place for families to come. And she's looking at it, and then she was like, if you could just put a little bit of you into here, I think it could go somewhere. And I was like, you don't know what you're talking about, but you know what, she was absolutely right. She was absolutely right. And so I made the big decision. I took the leap of faith. We couldn't grow anymore. I was doing a demo. We decided on selling the restaurant, and we didn't sell the concept. We just sold the spaces, and so we still kept the name and stuff, but we sold them. And then I was doing a demo, and we're trying to focus more now on going federal. Start shopping around, looking at places, and I came across the Leduc processing facility. I went in there, talked with some of the scientists in there about our product, and went for a tour. I felt like it was a little too small in there, like probably the same setup as ours currently. So I didn't really think that there was much volume we could put out from there. But it was kind of funny because as I was like sitting there and I was talking to the scientist, I see all these binders in the back, and all these binders here say Range Road meets Co. It says on there, and I'm like looking at this like, who the heck's this Range Road meets Co? Like, there's lots of binders here of them. Anyway, so it kind of let it pass, and then I was doing a demo. It came up again. Somebody told me and said, there's this guy, he's got a facility, Range Road meets Co., and it's over beside the Leduc processing facility. So I started Googling it. I went for a drive. I couldn't find it. I didn't know it was actually in the incubator site, as you learn that after, but I just drove around, couldn't find it. And I'm like, what? Screw it. I can't find this place. I'll just keep on looking around somewhere else. And so then I'm doing a demo over at Save On Foods. I run into this lovely lady, and she's like, tell me all about your product. And I give her the spiel. This is Bunso on, so and so. It's soy free, gluten free, hormone free. It's just bison and smoke. And I start giving her samples and explain to her about the whole cultural side of it, where it comes from. And she's just blown away. And she's like, you got to meet my son. And I was like, who's your son? She's like, his name is Brandon. And I was like, Brandon who? Brandon Markey. And I was like, I've heard that name before. And then so she gives me this card, and it's at Range Road meets Co. And I'm like, oh shit. So it was kind of funny. Yeah, I did, and it showed the same place. So then I called him. I couldn't find it. I sent him a freaking email, and yeah, soon we went in and started doing some R&D runs and hit it off. And in a few months down the road, I asked him to be my partner, and we started killing it. Those 35 stores jumped to 100 to 200 to 300. Sobeys, Safeway, Save On Foods, co-ops, Whole Foods is jumping on board. Loblaws is coming on board. Oh my goodness, I'm losing track now. Yeah, there's so many stores now. It's coming. We're just over 600 and some stores now, all through Western Canada, and growing daily now. And yeah, man, that's my story compressed. I'm looking at the time, and I'm like,
Well,
it's hard to get it,
it's
but
been, I haven't barely spoken 35 minutes, which I'm sure my wife can tell you that doesn't happen very often. But I'm really glad you shared what you did. Yeah, for you, that does sound condensed. We've been around each other long enough to know. I know that is condensed, but I appreciate you telling me your journey. Yeah, talk about, like, a lot of people in our business know the grocery store as a street fight. It is a hard business to survive, much less win at. But when you come to this business with the experiences that you have had and the challenges that your people have had, it is, I think, very commendable. And the fact that you've done it so graciously now that you're all grown up. But, I think it's a beautiful thing when you can share a story. A lot of people, when they look at their own struggles and their own fight in business or in life, they can sometimes feel very isolated, and they can feel very alone and frustrated, and like the world is out to get them at times. And when you can come through a journey like you've had, and you have battled, like you said, you didn't give up, I think it's a testimony of your character that's deep and wonderful. So I think, I'm glad you shared the story that you did. I think it was maybe 2 years ago when like I said, when I first tried your product and first met you. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me is that it wasn't just about a consumption occasion or a product market fit or some of the stuff that we know about to talk about in our line of work. There was something deeper, something more beautiful than I'm used to hearing. And so I just want to say that the opportunities that you have, that opportunities that you've taken to share your stories and versions of your stories, shorter or longer, I think is something that is missing in the food space. If you think of, just obviously look at how food brings us together and unites us. I think we're reminded of that during COVID when we couldn't experience food and gatherings like we were used to. It was it was a very poignant reminder, but those things have been forgotten again. And now, it's so easy for everyone to turn back to their devices, turn back to their stress, turn back to their work or their distractions, and they forget the people around them and the fact that enjoying food together. And we all have some cultures, right? We all have some part of our history that is important and cherished, and we have these memories. And the fact that you tell yours so beautifully is a wonderful thing. So grateful.
yeah, man. Thinking about the whole shift now, and CHFA being out there, and we have a booth, and we're looking at all these natural foods. Everyone's pushing to be in the natural foods, clean, healthy living. And then you look at our product, and it's like, this is probably one of the original categories of where they would have started from, and it's like so funny how all of a sudden now the category is called natural foods, but to us it was just called foods.
So true. So you and Brandon, you guys are always scheming. You guys always have stuff. Is there anything in the pipeline that you're allowed to say out loud? Things that you guys are working on or projects that are underway?
Yeah, there's a couple of them here. So we're working on a new packaging for Mitsoh, which is going to be similar. This is probably similar to the size of it. This is just a rough little copy of the size. And so we'll be doing pemican bites is what we're working on. We're also bringing out another line. We're working on some R&D runs. We've had a huge call-in for cranberry as well. So
A little bit of tartness in it. Yeah. Skip a little sweet, a little tart. That's
yeah, yeah.
fantastic.
So that's exciting on that side. There's some other projects too down the line that we're kind of working on. On my side here, I have through Native Delights brand, we're currently working on bringing traditional bannock back into mainstream now. Like again, being one of the first companies in history to do that and bring fried bannock and baked bannock back into mainstream. So we're going to focus on a D2C side first, and then B2B on that side too here. So we're looking to launch that.
Well, put me on your VIP for list for that one. I
Yeah,
love Bannock. I love it so much.
it's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy. So I'm super, super excited for that, and just blessed, honored to be able to play a small part in this, and how I can help and bring our people together and help inspire people to want something more, especially within my culture. And I might be the first person to do this, the first Indigenous person to break these barriers down, to kick these walls down, to do this, but I'm not going to be the last, man. So that's what I love and I'm looking forward to.
So good. Ian, thank you for your time and thank you for sharing all that you did. I am rooting for you. My team's rooting for you, and can't wait to hang out with you guys in Vancouver coming up.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you so much, everybody. Like, follow us, Mitsoh.com. Let's go.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Aisle 42. Make sure you follow Ian and the Mitsoh team on social and grab one of their products the next time you're at the grocery or convenience store. And don't forget to sign up for Ian's newsletter. I look forward to it every time it lands in my inbox. Okay, that's it for me. I'm Corwin Hebert from Ethical Food Group, and I'll see you in the future.